This is Steve. He's a kitten. He's destroying my house. Why is he destroying my house? Because you haven't subscribed to my vlog yet. Subscribe to my vlog and save my house. Please subscribe. Help me reach 1,000 subs. Steve wants you to, and he's cute. Hello and welcome. Good morning. I am the OGGM with another exciting adventure into the world of D&D. The most talked about, controversial, I need to shave, mess that is Wizards of the Coast's latest production. And what it all means. Hello, yes. So apparently we need to all be excited by the fact that Dungeon Masters cannot critical hit anymore. There's a lot to unpack in that sentence, Mr. Kenreck. So during his part of the interview at D&D Wizards Present, Todd Kenreck talked about how the DM can't critical hit anymore. So if a DM rolls a natural 20, there's no critical hit. Player characters can still do it. Why? Something to do with spells, criticals or not criticals, something to do with the swingingness of criticals and just, bad guys do enough damage on their own. Why should they get the extra benefit of criticals? I'm sure this will be gone into deeper as the playtest continues and more people confront the unusual phrasing of the sentence. And it could change. Remember, we're in the beginning days of the playtest and what D&D will eventually become. So anything Wizards of the Coast has said in the past couple days is pointless. Because one, Wizards of the Coast lies. And two, if they actually listen to the survey and enough people say that's stupid, they may change that. So right now, the statement is Dungeon Masters cannot critical. And there's a lot of ways to address that. Because he says Dungeon Masters can't critical hit. Now, in my 40 plus years of being a DM, I have never critical hit anyone. My bad guys, on the other hand, have critical hit a whole bunch of times. So he says specifically Dungeon Masters can't critical hit anymore. Not your bad guys can't. So there's some legal hedgeway around there. Hey, you can't crit me anymore. I've never critted you. That bad guy has. He rolled 3 natural 20s on you. That's not me. That's you because you chose to fight him. So there's a couple ways you could go at this. And again, remember, this is pointless because it's probably going to change. 1, session 0. You all just sit down and discuss. Are you cool with that? How about, we could say, well, if my bad guys don't get to critical hit, then you guys don't get to critical hit. And if you want to be able to critical hit, then my bad guy should be able to critical hit. Because it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense that if a first level player character fighter gets into a fight with a first level NPC fighter and they are exactly the same, they have the same armor, they have the same weapon, so numbers wise, they're basically the same guy, just one's an NPC. The PC gets to critical hit the NPC, but the NPC doesn't get to critical hit the player character, even though they're exactly the same. Now that makes no sense. Now I understand that this is part of the whole, we want to have more player agency and be more fair and never place players in a position where they might be in anything resembling danger in D&D anymore, because D&D isn't about combat and exploration anymore. It's about making players feel good and being a barista at Starbucks. I guess. I mean, the logic is thin. The logic is thin at best. So again, session 0, you just all sit down and decide, this is optional. Because remember, Wizards of the Coast also says, I love how they give themselves that, escape clause, where they always say after these things, but these are just options. Just because we're saying it doesn't make it canon. We're not forcing you to follow these rules. We're just saying. But you could ignore it. Because, great way to get yourself out of trouble, Wizards of the Coast. Sit down with your players and say, okay, this is a thing. Session 0, do you want this? If my bad guys can't critical hit, you can't critical hit. Or if you can critical hit, then so can my bad guys. And leave where the player's there. The players might say, if it means I don't take a critical damage from a bad guy, then I'll not critical hit. I mean, I do enough other things anyways. I mean, backstab, sneak attacks, spiritual strike, spells. Player characters have enough ways to pad their damage that, rolling 2d4 instead of 1d4 really isn't that much of a difference. Especially if, you're rolling two. I mean, I rolled 2d4 last night on a critical hit with a dagger, and I did 3 points of damage. So, yeah, I mean, I suppose. And critical hits and, like, carrier attacks, like backstab and strikes. I could also say, fine, your actual damage criticals, but the carrier attack, the backstab, the holy strike, that doesn't get the critical. That's just flat out 2d6, 3d6, 8d6. You don't roll. If you critical hit with your backstab, you're not rolling 4d6 instead of 2d6. You're just rolling critical on your dagger does a d4 plus a d4, but your backstab is still 2d6. I could be fine with that. But I'm not fine with the player characters getting a numerical advantage against my bad guys. Which just means that, like, DM, I'm going to have to either throw more bad guys at you to compensate for the fact that my bad guys can't critical hit anymore. Or I'm going to have to throw tougher bad guys at you to compensate for the fact that my bad guys can't critical hit anymore. Or, and here's the other loophole I like, especially after playing through Call of the Netherdeep and seeing some of the special abilities NPCs have that player characters don't have. In Call of the Netherdeep, you could say, fine. Okay. I am perfectly happy that on a natural 20, instead of rolling 1d6, you get to roll 2d6 and then add your modifiers. Numerically, it's not going to be that much of a difference. Okay? Just chances are, on a 1 through 6 chance, you doing enough damage to make the critical worthwhile is slim. I mean, you're probably going to roll a 3 and a 2. So 5 points instead of 3 points. Plus your plus 2 damage isn't going to make that much difference to my 80 hit point troll. So fine. I'm okay with you player characters getting to critical and my bad guys don't get to critical anymore. Because now, and I'm following Call of the Netherdeep, so if Matt Mercer does it, it must be okay. How about, DMs, your bad guys get to do something else on a natural 20 instead of extra damage? Because if I have a choice between rolling 2d6 instead of 1d6 or doing something far worse, I'm going to choose to do far worse. I don't know. Here's some examples. How about on a natural 20, a monster that is larger than the player character gets to swallow the player character whole? Natural 20, shark swallows you whole. Natural 20, giant frog swallows you whole. Natural 20, what is this thing? The great worm of Dune rises up and swallows you whole. That's one. Another one could be special effects. Instead of doing extra damage on a natural 20, I get to do something else, like knock you over. Wolves, natural 20, knock over. You have to spend an action. How about the undead? Think of all the fun things you could add to undead and demons and spellcasters and cultists. How about instead of double damage, on a natural 20, my undead paralyzes you or drains a level or something even more frightening. On a natural 20, my wraith gives you a black wound. You have a festering wound that can't be healed by normal means. And every day you're taking damage because of that natural 20 and that festering, necrotic damage. How about on a natural 20, my dragon gets to get an extra attack? Or, on a natural 20, my troll gets to rend you and do another bite attack if it rolled a natural 20. There's a lot of things that you could use to replace rolling 2d6. Because again, if my choice for a critical hit is 2d6 plus 2 as opposed to 1d6 plus 2, or on a natural 20, my giant frog swallows you whole, I'm going for swallow you whole. It's much more cinematic. It's much more impactful. It's much more frightening. And remember, the player characters agreed to it. Okay, you don't want my bad guys to do special things on natural 20s, then you have to not be able to do special things. At which point, my history has shown me more often than not the players will be, all right. Because remember my gunfighter, example. Or the alchemist example that I've told. I had a game and a guy wanted to bring in a gunfighter and he was all guns. And I would guess he was expecting me to respond negatively because he was prepared for a fight. So after, 5 minutes of listening to him talk about guns and why he should have guns, and, he was there, he was ready for that fight, my response was, okay. And he just didn't know how to respond. You can have guns, but then my bad guys get to have guns. So if you have access to guns and gunpowders and that technology now exists in my world, then yeah, my bad guys have access to it too. And guess what? I have more bad guys than you have bullets. So, I don't know. I kind of like the idea of 20 orcs carrying rifles and marching on a village. So, sure, yeah, we can do that. At which point the guy just said, oh, yeah, you know what? I don't know if I want to be a gunfighter. Maybe I'll just play something else instead. Because they didn't like the idea of him him having something special, but then if everybody else had it. But it makes sense. If you've got a gun and that technology exists, that's the whole point of guns, right? That everybody could use them. It didn't really require any special training. It leveled the battlefield. That's why it won the West, because we had guns and the other people didn't. And I'm not going to get into that. But yeah, guns level the playing field. So if you can have a gun, then my bad guys can have a gun. If you can have a combat wheelchair, then my bad guys can have combat wheelchairs. And I don't know, a motorcycle gang of skeletons riding combat wheelchairs sounds kind of cool. Oh no, but then I don't want that gun anymore. Because if I'm not special, then nobody else should be special. So, okay, if you get to critical, then my bad guys get to critical. If my bad guys don't get to critical, then you don't get to critical. More often than not, they're going to be like, yeah, okay, I'm fine with that. Nobody getting to critical. I mean, nobody gets to critical in the Monday night game I'm in. Bad guys don't get to do it. Good guys don't get to do it. And natural 20 just means you automatically hit. And everybody's fine with that. But if I have to stick to the only player characters get to roll critical hits, not the bad guys. And remember again, Kenreck said DMs don't get to critical hit. Not bad guys. Not the bad guys don't get to critical hit. It's just a weird phrasing. But, okay, fine. If I am running 1D&D, or if I'm running 5e, and if that comes up to the point where I'm going to say, okay, do you want to implement this rule where player characters get to critical hit, but my NPCs don't, my bad guys don't? They're going to say yes. At which point I'm going to say, but instead of critical hitting, following the example of Call of the Netherdeep and St. Mercer, my bad guys get to do something else on a natural 20. And I'm not going to tell you what it is until you run into them. Because I know you guys have got, a whole smorgasbord of things that you can add on to your characters to make them do more damage and be more effective. I mean, look at Holy Strike from a paladin or backstab from a rogue, and that's not even counting magic and other shenanigans and flanking and other things. So sure, yeah, you can have that. Here's my gift to you, player characters. You get to do the one thing that my bad guys can't. But in exchange, my bad guys might do something else on a natural 20. I don't know. I kind of like the idea of you being swallowed whole by a giant frog. I definitely like the ideas of undead doing like black wounds and other sort of really frightening crap. So, okay, Todd Kenreck, we're going to see where you're going with this because remember, again, this is still the early stages of the playtest, so that's probably going to change. And Wizards of the Coast lies. So, yeah, I understand why people are upset about it, but here my thinking is like, fine. Okay, I'm happy with this. Fine. Because now this opens the door for me being able to do things far worse than an extra d6 of damage. I'm okay with that. I am the OGGM. If you appreciate the nonsense that's coming out of my mouth, let me know. If you have any comments or criticisms or any ideas of your own, let me know. If you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. Help me hit 1,000 subs. Keep that kitten happy. Till then, I will talk to you later. And of course, as always, get off my land.